I did not think that this would become so much of an obsession that I'd end up writing an entire series of video essays about this game, but here we are. For the record, I should preface this video by saying that I have never actually tried to get into a real fighting game until now, making Tekken 8 my official cherry popper for learning how to play for real and not just mashing buttons and seeing what happens. To be honest, a lot of my lack of motivation in the past were excuses born almost entirely from fear. What if I'm not very good at it? What if it takes me forever to be good at it? Look at what these fucking crazy-ass players are doing, man. What the hell is this? How could I ever hope to do something like that? Fighting games are kind of like picking up guitar, drawing, singing, playing sports, or literally any other skill you might ever show interest in. It's not something you get good at overnight. It's something you practice and sink time into, which is also something I don't really have a lot of, but not even that could stop me from sinking my teeth into this title as soon as I saw it. For the record, I have played the last two Tekken games, that being 6 and 7, a lot more casually with friends. I was always drawn to the character Alyssa, mainly because
she is such a bad bitch, though. I will fuck the shit out of that robot, man. I'm not even...
So that's just kind of what stuck moving forward. In the future, I'm probably going to end up giving the older titles a shot as soon as I can find somebody to play with, but that's probably for another time. For now, we focus on Tekken 8, which honestly might be my actual game of the year, but that's neither here nor there. It's kind of hard to know exactly where to start with a title like Tekken. Time and time again, through my daily rituals of trying to memorize Alyssa's combos, figure out how to break grabs, and occasionally get confused by the sudden change in moveset because I didn't notice that I accidentally turned on special style, I had been told multiple times by friends who like fighting games a lot more than I do that I literally chose the hardest game to get into. And to be honest, I do and don't agree. Tekken 8 might seem a bit much on its surface, and it definitely is the most mechanically dense, layered, and demanding game I've ever played, but the challenge of learning and mastering this game isn't any more demanding than other titles like Skullgirls and Guilty Gear, two other games I've been trying to learn alongside this. You just have a longer list of tools in your arsenal, and a hell of a lot more to account for. The intimidation mostly stems from the absolutely absurd amount of options you have. It's demanding in the sense that there is a hell of a lot more to study, but I'll go into that much more thoroughly later. In typical fighting game fashion, you have to master every matchup and get comfortable with it. Pair that with a variety of different stances and attack types, and you have what is essentially one of the hardest fighting games to master probably ever. That kind of intimidation is probably what keeps most people from giving it a shot, which is totally valid, but before I can fully extrapolate my feelings on this game and go further in depth into what makes it so damn special, I think it's first appropriate to clarify my history with competition in games in the first place. This is my first time getting into an actual fighting game competitively, but it's not my first time playing a fighting game, nor is it my first time playing a game competitively. I used to play Tekken 6 and Mortal Kombat Armageddon repeatedly when I was a teenager, but I never actually put any thought into the mechanics. I would generally just press buttons and hope I won. Smash Bros was the first time I tried to actually get into a game more competitively, but that didn't end up lasting very long, partially because I had some personal drama with other people in the community, but also because most of my favorite players got hit with some sort of sexual misconduct, and I'm not going to go into specifics, you can look that up yourself. I did end up going to a tournament, but I got bodied pretty fast, not even managing to secure a single win in either the base tournament or the losers bracket, which was admittedly disappointing but unsurprising. So over time, the game collected dust on my shelf and left a pretty big hole that needed to be filled. I bought Skullgirls, but the scene to that one wasn't as lively as it was when the game first dropped. I could occasionally get a player match online, but that really depended on the time of day. I needed a newer title to fill that void, and coincidentally, Tekken 8 was getting announced at just the right time. I had a lot of nostalgia playing Tekken 6 with my cousin back when we were teenagers, and I even bought Tekken 7 with the intention of playing with him, only for him to end up moving. So, like Smash Bros, that one started collecting dust on my shelf, save for the occasional get-together with friends. Most of my time with that game was spent watching other people play it. Watching crazy matches like that one time Lil Majin managed to defeat JDCR with starstruck eyes, thinking to myself, that could never be me. Truthfully, it probably never will be, and I'm fine with that. When I bought Tekken 8, I just wanted to be decent at least. My goal was more or less to go to another local tournament and secure 1 or 2 wins without being tossed into the losers bracket within the first match, something that happened with Smash Bros. This has been the era of fighting games that are a little more lenient on newcomers and have built-in options allowing them to get into the game more effectively. Street Fighter 6, MK1, and Guilty Gear Strive are all really good starting places, which are somewhat different from the titles that came before them. So when I got my hands on Tekken 8, I was completely blown away by how enticingly easy it was to get into. Keep in mind I say easy to get into, not necessarily easy to play. This game does feel great, it's fast-paced, responsive, and it feels fucking amazing to style on scrubs, but on top of that, it takes the complicated formula of a series that is known for being extremely in-depth and complex, and manages to give the player tools that make taking that first step really straightforward. All of your battles are saved as replays, and you have the ability to watch these replays with the game itself giving you built-in tips on how you could have played better. Sorta. This replay function is a bit underwhelming because it doesn't literally suggest every single thing that you could have done differently. It only really pauses the video every few seconds to tell you basic shit like how to break grabs, what your most effective punishing move should have been, and the designated combo for a specific move you performed but didn't follow up on. These are useless to someone who's been playing these games for a long time, but straightforward and somewhat helpful for someone just getting into the game. It even has a built-in practice setting that recreates the fight with an NPC and allows you to try out whatever it suggests. The part that got me into the meat and potatoes of the game's combat, however, are the combo challenges. These, as well as the 20-plus main designated moves my character has, are what primarily gave me a rough idea of how this game plays. I have noticed that specific moves utilized in these combo challenges had alternative options for follow-ups, so I was able to break apart these combos and effectively utilize specific moves in the lineup. The more things you learn, the more unpredictable your fighting style becomes. Out of all the fighting games out there, Tekken is one of the ones with the absolute highest skill ceilings, but I'm not intimidated by that because it's really goddamn fun to play and learn. You're telling me that not only is this game challenging and rewarding, but that there's so much to the way it plays that I could, and most likely probably will, play it for several years and never get tired of it. That no matter how good I get, I'll still be learning more and more about how this game works. That even if I manage to master one character and every single possible matchup, I'll still probably find someone better than me, or still have a myriad of other characters to spend an equal amount of time learning and getting good at. I've become addicted to this game, bro. I think about it all the time, every day. What little bit of free time I get in the day goes to this game. It's actually ruined my ability to consistently make time for other things. The skill ceiling for most fighting games seems endless. There's still people learning new things about classics like Street Fighter, but Tekken is definitely one of the most varied and complicated ones I've ever played. Just looking at one character's moves, you see that they have about 20, but wait, what is this? Oh my god. As I said earlier, this means that not only do you need to account for each move your character has and learn them, as well as test out the scenarios that each move is appropriate for, but you also need to learn the matchup of every other character in the game and their own respective list of 100 plus moves. Basically, the 4 buttons on every controller are mapped to the character's limbs. They are numbered 1 through 4 in order to keep discussions across platforms relatively simple. Even if you're using one of those arcade thingies, you should still be able to follow what people are saying when they address these moves. 1 is left punch, 2 is right punch, 3 is left kick, 4 is right kick. That's easily the most important part to learn when talking about your combos with others online. Most moves are also different depending on what direction you aim the thumbstick. There are so many different positions your character can be in, and each of these buttons does something different for each of these positions. Standing is the position you start in, but you can also duck. Then when you rise back up, that brief window of time is also its own stance and temporarily gives you access to a few moves that aren't available otherwise. Then, there's the matter of directional attacks like forward, back, down, back, up, back, and so on. But on top of that, we also have to account for three-dimensional space, meaning that there are even more moves while you make turns around your opponent. There are moves exclusive to when you're lying down on the ground. That is a positional stance, even if it's unintentional. I could get bogged down into listing every single possibility, but the point remains that fighting games in general are already pretty dense. Tekken 8 takes it to a whole other level. Along with this variety of offensive options is a variety of defensive options. Tekken 8 is probably the most aggressive fighting game I've ever played in my entire life, which is why defense is very important. Attacks fall under 3 categories. Lows, which are usually tripping moves, but sometimes can be a poke or just an effective damaging combo starter. Mids, which are a front-facing attack. And highs, which can range anywhere from overheads to aerial attacks. Obviously, low blocks are for blocking lows, while mid blocks are for blocking mids and highs. Pretty standard, though aerial combat is not really commonplace in this game like in your typical 2D fighter. Which isn't to say that there aren't fighters who do rely on aerial combat, like Yoshimitsu or Lily. The best way to describe the combat of Tekken is that it's extremely weighty. There's already a skill curb in being able to keep up with highs, mids, and lows and block them accordingly, but Tekken has some elements that mix things up a little bit. A block can easily be countered by a grab, in which the opponent is given a brief window of opportunity to break the grab. Every character has multiple grabs, with some even basing their entire fighting style around it. Each of these grabs have a different method of breaking it, either by pressing 1, 2, or 1 and 2. Blocks can also be countered with chip damage as well, meaning that it isn't always a reliable option. Certain moves can still hurt you even if the block does reduce it a bit. This obviously speaks to the aggressive style of Tekken 8, which has been a bit of a turnoff for the higher level Tekken veterans, but it's misleading to say that the player is completely without options. If it were really a contest to see who can land a combo first, it wouldn't be a very good fighting game, would it? Parrying is a necessary mechanic to learn and can often turn the tides of a match. If you predict a low, for example, aiming the thumbstick down and towards your opponent at just the right time will execute a low parry. It's a risk because you're dropping your defense and, if poorly timed, can turn you into combo food, but along with the risk comes reward, adding to the give and take ideology present all across Tekken 8's mechanical structure. One of the staples of Tekken is the rage art you gain once you're close to dying. Imagine the obnoxious thing that they added to MK11 where you can turn around a fight by claiming 30% of your opponent's health just because you pressed both triggers, except you actually have to earn it in this one, and it's a hell of a lot less punishing. The lower your health is, the more damage the special attack does. But much like the parry, it's also a risky move since it primarily depends on whether or not your opponent is blocking. It's safer to utilize when they're in the middle of an attack, granting the player armor. Tekken 8 also introduces this blue meter called the heat gauge. Certain attacks trigger it, as well as the right bumper. This causes the meter to deplete, giving the player a limited amount of time to use a special attack separate from their rage art. That's not the only use for it, as it can also be used as a combo extender. Same moves that activate it can also be used as combo finishers, but if the player flicks the stick towards their opponent, the meter can be used to close the gap and continue the combo. It's all about what might be appropriate at the right time, introducing an element of strategy to how the player approaches combat. You might have also noticed that I referenced armor as well. Both the heat gauge and rage art are difficult to cancel with an attack and can only be dodged or blocked. This is because they both have armor, and while an attack does still do damage, it also basically guarantees that you get hit. But it isn't just these special moves that have armor. Each character has a handful of moves that also have armor. If you're getting bombarded with an intense combo, this serves as a good alternative to blocking by allowing you to reciprocate with a fence that can't be cancelled. Be careful though. With enough pressure, the armor can be shattered and put you at risk. As I said, give and take. There are a ton of different mechanics present in Tekken 8, and every single one of them work in tandem with each other. They're each distinct and useful with their own set of strengths and flaws. I also forgot to mention that the environment plays a huge role in this game as well. If your combo can make it to the wall, it actually makes it so much harder for your opponent to break free. This basically makes smaller maps a game of inverted tug-of-war. Some walls have the opponent sent flying into the sky, allowing your combo to extend further, and there's also walls that you can break if you put enough pressure on them, in which you have to earn your combo extensions with aggressive play. But my favorite is probably the floor breaks, in which a strong enough combo can break the entire floor and send you both into the area below you. Only a couple of maps do this, and they're honestly some of my favorites. Since I basically already had history with the Tekken games and really took a liking to Alyssa beforehand, it was kind of a no-brainer that she was going to become my main. But picking a main isn't going to be easy for most players. In fact, it's one of the toughest problems I run into when trying to get into a fighting game. I'm also not really the best person to give advice when it comes to choosing a main because, based on the other games I've invested my time into, it seems like my dick usually picks for me. But really the best advice I can give when picking a main is just pick whoever looks cool. I'm not even kidding, it's legitimately that simple. Since Captain Falcon was my main in Smash Bros, I gravitate more towards faster characters and satisfying combos. Luckily for me, a lot of cute girls tend to be petite and usually end up falling under that category, but not everyone is going to be the same. You might be more drawn to a grappler, or maybe you like a good glass cannon. It depends on you. Combos and fighting styles are kind of a visual language we use to communicate with each other. So there's an art to playing fighting games that encourages a performative sense of self-expression from the player. Now I can sing Tekken 8's praises until I'm blue in the face, but I'd be lying if I said it was all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, It is pretty gay, but that's unrelated. Tekken 8 does have one thing going for it, which is that it's popular, so a match is instant when playing online. For the most part, it's been pretty solid. Very few issues in terms of connection. Anytime I did run into a connection that was big, stinky, poopy butt, 9 times out of 10 it was their fault. I will say that my PS5, for no reason at all, will sometimes disconnect from the internet for shits and giggles, and that's a bit annoying, mainly because quitting out during matches too many times will get you banned, but for the most part, it's been a positive experience, which is great because quick matches and ranked matches are exclusively what I spend most of my time doing. There were some people here and there that would send me personal messages, either shit-talking me because I won, or mocking me in a condescending tone because I lost, but truthfully, my biggest hang-up with the online is that both parties have to agree to a rematch for one to happen. On quick match, that makes a lot of sense, because that's a casual mode with nothing on the line. But for ranked matches, I think forcing a rematch is necessary, because the amount of times I've had a one-sided match, whether I lose or win, and they quit out so fucking fast I can't even respond, I get a little annoyed. Primarily because that just seems so fucking petty. And I can't tell if it's more annoying when I've won or when they pull this shit after kicking my ass. I guess it's partly entitlement, but for something like ranked, I feel like too many people just give up on the rematch when they sense they're gonna lose because they're not actually interested in getting better or learning something new. They're in it to win it. This becomes even more clear with people who quit out once you start beating their ass. I've had people rage quit because they rely on spam and then come to the brutal realization that it isn't gonna magically guarantee a win, and I can't help but laugh when that happens. Like, literally, what did you expect? But in some ways, I do get it. Tekken 8 is really goddamn fun, like addictingly fun. Not just fun to play, but fun to watch too. It's so satisfying, but it's really goddamn intimidating, and for one reason, and one reason alone. As I said, this game is aggressive as hell. It's like Skullgirls level of aggressive. There's a ton of pressure to the point that it can honestly feel really exhausting. Fighting games are already tense and insanely difficult to play in a way that makes Dark Souls look like fucking Animal Crossing. Pair that with Tekken having a lot more of a knowledge check in its design than most fighting games, and then add in brutal aggression to the mix, and you have a game that can get so obnoxiously difficult sometimes that fucking Knee, one of the top Tekken players of all time, literally said it's too goddamn much. I love this game, but I do get it. There are so many times where I've made one mistake, whiffed one combo, performed one misinput, made one wrong decision, and then basically just had to pull out the popcorn and watch as my character gets fucking bodied again. It can get kind of frustrating sometimes, especially if you feel like you didn't deserve the loss. One of the biggest culprits for me personally are king mains who spam that obnoxious slow kick. I've managed to counter a fair few with relentless parries, but sometimes I'll have that one match where I fall for it way too many times and then just watch as my pride crumbles before me. Listen, I've beaten the Souls games, Resident Evil 4 on hard mode, some of the most challenging levels of the original Doom. I play most games on hard mode because I do love a good challenge, and I never shy away from it, but I also can't pretend that I'm not a sore loser. I can go on and on about how Dark Souls taught me to accept my losses and keep trying, but realistically I think it's just an example of Stockholm Syndrome because I have been known to curse, bitch, and moan over a bullshit death. I've even developed this funny habit where I shout the name of my character when they don't do what I want them to do. But that's kind of the thing. It's easy to avoid accountability when I lose in a single-player game because I'm fighting against a computer. I can always blame my character, my controller, the game, whatever, and I often do. These games don't actually teach me how to get better at handling a loss because they still had a scapegoat for me to make excuses. But in a fighting game, it's different because I'm fighting other people. They're not some brain-dead NPC with the same attack patterns. They have more intelligence than a computer could ever hope to. Now, I no longer have an excuse. I know that my losses are entirely my own fault. Even if someone is spamming or using a cheap gimmick of some kind, it's still kind of on you for falling for it. If they're a trash player for relying on spam, what does that say about you as a player for getting beaten by such a cheap trick? That isn't to say that you should hate yourself for being bad at video games, but to step back for a moment and realize it's not that big a deal. I listed a few of my issues with Tekken 8, but the most egregious one is that quitouts don't count against you. in ranked matches. If you quit out, the game should treat that as a loss and award points to your opponent while subtracting your own. But unfortunately, it don't work like that, making it easy for people who suck ass at this game to climb to the high ranks without any problems. You do get banned for quitting out too many times, but it's super reliant on how many times you get reported, and it's not always accurate. I have more respect for people who give up by just putting down their controller and letting the other person get their win, because at the very least, you're giving them the points that they deserve to keep climbing the ranks. Quitting out is a bad habit that a lot of people have when things don't go their way. And while I do think it's a good idea to step away from a game when it's pissing you off, quitting out mid-fight doesn't teach you shit. You're not focusing on how you lost, you're just focusing on the fact that you didn't win. You come away from the fight learning nothing and gaining nothing, hoping that whatever match comes next will fall for whatever gimmicks you've adopted without actually trying to improve as a player. Winning does feel great. It's a nice temporary ego boost. Styling on somebody, making all the right moves, and coming away with a sense of satisfaction is precisely why I play games like this in the first place. It feels even better when the match is really fucking close too. But let's face it, winning is kind of overrated. Yes, it's annoying to face loss after loss, but you do learn something, making it a valuable experience. If you just spend all your time winning, it would be a little boring. That's why I find myself less angry and more impressed when someone actually starts to adapt to my repetitive playstyle, because God knows that I have some habits that I overuse and over-rely on. Because it means that I'm fighting someone who is paying attention to what I'm doing and switching it up to keep me guessing, forcing me to change my own strategy. It might be kind of fun to kick someone's ass so hard they immediately quit, mainly because it's funny, but a match like that never compares to some of my personal favorites, like getting to the third match on the 5th round with both of us at a sliver of health and 10 seconds left on the clock. That's the thing about Tekken and really any fighting game, you're only as good as you let yourself be, and feeling immense shame is kind of unnecessary. It is true that you need to be critical of yourself and accept criticism when you receive it and practice like a motherfucker, but at the end of the day, it is a game. There are just as many people who suck at these games just as much, if not more so than you. I have lost several matches, but I've also won a ton of matches too. There's no skill ceiling, but once you start making progress, the floor seems really far down. The people I've met through this game have been some of the most supportive and awesome people imaginable, which is super strange. You do sometimes get that one asshole that tells you to get good, but 9 times out of 10 people have given me legitimate advice and told me what to improve on and how to get better. Because at the end of the day, we play this game to have fun. There was a fantastic video from Polygon about getting into fighting games that puts it better than I could ever hope to. It is such a rich and meaningful experience, and while it can be intimidating, it can be equally as rewarding. Tekken 8 has put me on an interesting journey, and I'm pretty excited to see where this takes me moving forward. While I think Tekken is the best, I also think you should get into whatever fighting game seems up your alley. Whatever seems cool to you is a completely valid choice, but if you find yourself watching Evo clips with starry eyes and telling yourself, I could never be like that, I still think you should try to give it a shot. Because like any other skill, it's something that takes practice, and you can never actually know that you're capable of reaching that level unless you pick up the game and try it out.